Good evening, everybody. I'm so excited that we're having chats again this year and that we've got an opportunity to share. There are some amazing speakers who are coming up. So the idea with these chats are for you to engage with the people who are in the chat. And this evening, I've got Andrew Mintar with me from LabXchange. Welcome, Andrew.
Hi, Corinne. Thanks very much for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. We'd love to learn more a bit about you. Do you want to tell us a bit about your background and how you landed up at LabXchange?
Certainly, thanks very much. So I work in Cape Town, as you can tell from the accent. I'm not from overseas, but LabXchange is a US or a Harvard-developed project, and everything you're going to see tonight is a completely free resource for science educators, but not only educators, also students. And my background is I'm on the partnerships team for LabXchange. So what that means is I help people become aware of this free resource and try to get them to give us feedback as to what they'd like to see more of or less of, because it's our community that essentially helps drive us and helps us to create better and newer types of content.
Oh, cool. So hi, Frankie. It's good to see you on the chat. Thanks for being here. So, Andrew, do you want to dive right in and start sharing with everyone?
Yeah, certainly. Can you let everyone see my screen? I'm
going to show your screen. Yeah, it's visible.
Thanks very much. So hi again, everyone. I'm afraid I can't see you, but Karen will tell me if there are any questions. This isn't a formal presentation. This is a conversation. So please feel free at any time to put a question in the chat box. Karen will let me know. She'll relay it to me, and I'll try and respond as best I can. So as I've said, my name is Andrew, and I work with LabXchange. And you're all probably wondering, well, what the heck is this all about? So let me jump right in. So LabXchange is a completely free platform for teaching and learning. So it's aimed at students as well as educators. It's aimed at the high school level as we understand it in South Africa. So for students ages 13 up to undergraduate level. And the point of that is to become part of the student's learning journey. We're also, as I said, a community connecting students, teachers, but not only those two groups, also researchers. So allowing these groups to interact and sort of collaborate to solve real-world problems. And as I said before, this was developed by Harvard University, and it's completely free thanks to the grant funding that we get from the Amgen Foundation. Now, the Amgen Foundation is also part of the reason we have quite a strong science focus is because they're a large biotechnology company in the US. So maybe you'd like to know what you can do with LabXchange. This is a very brief slide, but I'm going to jump straight into a tour of LabXchange and show you as an educator exactly what you can do with it and how it can help save you time and put you and your students back in the driving seat of their education. So as it says on the screen, you can explore new topics, you can explore ideas around careers in STEM if you're a student or a learner, and you can design and share new personalized learning experience. So you can actually tailor content or bits and pieces of content, put them together and put that into a more personalized understanding or maybe a more curriculum relevant understanding for your learners and for your classes. There's also discussion, that we offer through discussion forums, and you can apply science to real world issues. And obviously we also have professional development opportunities, mainly focused on the youth group, but also on educators. So there's content available, which you'll see that's available for students leaving into university, helping them make that decision. But not only that, also for university students possibly leaving university and thinking about a career in STEM. And then we also offer a functionality around mentoring, which I'll show you. But right now what I'm going to do is just click on the link and we're going to go to the LabXchange website. So if you were to Google LabXchange, you would come up with www.labexchange.org. And this is our homepage. Now, essentially, this just gives you a quick overview of who we are, some of our partners, and then the types of accounts you can have. So you can create an account. There's no cost. As I said, everything's free, and it doesn't hide anything either. And here is just an example of some finger tabs or some tabs of some content that we offer. So I'm just going to scroll back up to the top of the screen for those of you who are looking hard at that screen, and I'm going to click on the library. So the library is essentially where we have all this content. It's literally a library of, as you can see at the top here, 7,245 different pieces of content. So we call a different piece of content an asset. So I'm going to show you now what types of subjects we look at in terms of the content we have available. in terms of the content types, and just explain some of the nomenclature or some of the vocab we use around our content. So when we use the word content, we talk about it in the sense of a single piece of content is what we call an asset. And I'll get to why, I'll explain in a moment why that's important. But over here on the left-hand side of the library, you see there's this refining section. And that is essentially your navigation tool that allows you to look and see what subjects we have. So maybe you're interested in a particular subject. So like I said, we have a strong biological sciences bent. You can see we have almost 5,000 pieces of content or assets for that. And you can see there's a drop-down arrow, which essentially means there are further categorizations or subcategorizations around the biological sciences. So you can see there's biochemistry, microbiology, evolution, cancer, biophysics, stem cells, lots of different areas if you might find useful for a particular project or a particular piece of work you're doing with your students.
Andrew, can you tell us the other subjects
Absolutely, yes.
you clicked?
Oh, all of them. There's quite a list.
Of them? Yeah, so just some of them.
There's genetics, physiology, structural biology, molecular biology, techniques for biological techniques, zoology, plant sciences, systems biology, bioengineering, biophysics, drug development, computational biology. That's pretty much all of them.
And then in the subjects before this, so the big general subjects?
Yes, that's what I pop back up to. So you can see we've got things like health science, we've got chemistry and physics content, we've got global health related content, so things like communicable diseases, so the idea around coronavirus, or health systems, mental health, climate change, maternal and child health. We've also got areas of science and society, the intersection there, professional development, as I mentioned earlier, and then we've got things like the scientific process. So scientific methodology, experimental design, data analysis, ethics, lab etiquette and safety. A lot of these things are pertinent, but aren't necessarily, there's not a lot necessarily available all in one place. We also have, as I mentioned previously, some content around preparing students for university or preparing them for graduate school.
Andrew, there's a question. So
sure,
the question is, Nikki is asking, hi, Andrew, this looks really interesting. Are there any simulations in manufacturing?
No, not manufacturing, because we haven't got that subject area as a focal point. We are focused, as I said, initially on science. This year, what we're doing is we're also rolling out into mathematics and statistics. So the content around those pieces will grow. LabXchange creates its own content. So you can see in the bottom right here, this X, what we call the little pennant icon that shows. So
just show them again. I don't know if they saw that because the question was over. So just show where the X was again, please.
The X, I'm just circling with my mouse. It's just in the bottom right of each piece of content.
Yes.
So we create our own content, but we also have all those content partners that I mentioned earlier, and I'll show you them again. Don't worry, they're in the refine area on the left here. And so we have content focused on science, and so we've got a lot of scientific partners, and we're expanding into mathematics and statistics, but we don't yet have manufacturing to answer the specific question. So if I just carry on, if we look by subject area, what I can also show you now is by content type. So we do have text and we have video, that's stock standard. You're all very au fait with all of those types of tools to use in the class, but we also have some different pieces of content. We have a pathway, which I'll explain in a moment. We have simulations, which you all clearly understand and have exposure to. We've also got question banks, so assessments and assignments, single questions and groups of questions. And we also have the structure for you to create your own questions, whether you want a short answer question or a multiple choice. You can create that yourself with your own subject or content to the question, but the structure is provided. We also have narrative content, which is quite interesting. So narrative content is trying to showcase what real science is like today, give students an idea of what it's like to be a real scientist, and so increase the transparency around what's happening in science. And so these are pieces of content that are essentially written interviews or written pieces of content by scientists themselves, telling us what are their challenges of being a young scientist, an old scientist, a scientist from a previously disadvantaged background. working overseas in different cultures, and all these different types of questions. These people give insight as to what it's like to be a scientist and provide that from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So these are great pieces of content for students to be able to read to get insight into what it's like to be a scientist today.
Sounds like could be great discussion points for schools too.
Exactly. We also have some interactive content, which I'll show you as well. We have assignments, we have case studies. So case studies are really designed around helping students to get a better understanding of how to write up a proper case study. I'm sure a lot of you have given case studies previously and had experiences with students who maybe don't really grasp the layout and the idea. So these, again, give students an example and let them really come to grips with what it is to sort of write their own case study. We also have audio content. At the moment, that's limited to a podcast series we did with our previous founder, Dr. Robert Liu. He unfortunately passed away last year, but he managed to complete a series of podcasts interviewing a lot of international and South African scientists who are leaders in their area, and some of them are really, really interesting and really topical. So I'd encourage you to have a look at those. We then have a cluster, which I'll show you as well, and some great high-quality international textbooks, which are freely available on the site. So what I'm going to do now is I've pre-opened a few of these different types of content, just the ones that are slightly different that you may not have seen as regularly as the others. So what I'm going to do now is just retrace my steps and say a single piece of content we call an asset. Now, when I stitch those assets together, we call that a pathway. You can think of it sort of like a song playlist from the good old days when you'd sit at the radio and record your song on a tape deck. So what I'm going to do is just open a pathway that we've got. It's this one here, the coronavirus. I've opened it up here. So what it's showing you is it's a screen showing you the heading up top, a little explanation about what this is. So this is a piece, a string of content pieces. You can have as many as you like or as few as you like. We recommend anything from about 10 to 15. I think this one's 9. And you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, these are all text pieces. But essentially, this is explaining coronavirus, the outbreak, how viruses work, and giving more insight into the topic of viruses. And so this is something we developed just by taking the pieces of content we have on the library and putting them together. So too could you as a teacher. You could, what we call, clone. So up at the top here, you can see there's a favorites bar. So I've made it part of my favorites. And you can assign or share. And then there's these 3 dots. Before I go there, you can see in the top right, there's an A. That just means I've signed up for an account and I am currently logged in. All that means is that there is a couple layers of functionality available to me as a teacher. So one of the layers available to you is maybe you find that you want to teach viruses and you want to use this pathway. You could just click on these 3 dots, click clone, and what that's going to do is that's going to copy and paste essentially the same pathway, but into your private library. So nobody can see this area. It's your private area, and you can create content and put content in there, whatever you like, and no one will see it unless you choose to share it with them. So now this is an example of a current piece of content that I can now edit. So I can edit the name of this, I can edit the description, the subjects it relates to, the background knowledge required, and I can say, well, I don't necessarily want to show bat flight information, so I'm going to toss that one. So I'm going to remove it. But then at the bottom is the option to add content. So now I'm actually going to add a piece of content that I've got in my sort of personal stash. I can either use the public library and add any pieces of content I like. I can add my own content, which I haven't created any input in here, or I can use favorites. If you're an organization, you have an organizational library, which as an individual you won't. Or I can add new content. So here, this is an example of types of content that you can add from other sources. So maybe you've got a really great set of questions or question paper that you've developed, or maybe you've got a great worksheet you've developed, and you can essentially place that in a document and put that in here. You could also add your own video. If I was to click here, I won't publish it just yet. I can put in a YouTube link, and I can pull in a video from YouTube that's relevant to my students' needs. Or maybe I'm creating content for other teachers. Maybe you're a head teacher creating content. You can share this with your other your colleagues. And so you just also put in who the author is. You can add some tags if you'd like, change the image, And then there are some learning objectives you can add to or change if you're copying something, or add to content you're creating. And these are based around Bloom's taxonomy. So they start from the really basic of summarize and design, etc., all the way down to interpret or critique or analyze. So this offers you a bit more flexibility around, flip, I need to create some content for a class I've got tomorrow. Let's see what's in the library. Let's just do a quick search, clone it, and now I've got something I can show to my students. So this is the idea of a pathway. And as I said before, a pathway is just taking different bits and pieces on the public library and putting it into a theme, if you will. So I'm going to close this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you onto the next idea of the next group up of an asset, and that's called a cluster. So now what I've talked about is a single piece of content, being a video or a piece of text or audio or anything that's a single piece. Then we work up into the pathway, and now we're working into the cluster. So this cluster is one that, again, LabXchange developed, and it was for the Amgen Foundation. They've got an ABE, Amgen Biotechnology Experience operation across the globe for students, and this is a piece of content they wanted for their US class. Essentially, this is teaching people foundational concepts and techniques in biotechnology. But what we've done is every hexagon you see here represents a pathway, just like you saw on coronavirus. So it's X number of pieces long. There could be videos in them. There could be anything. What we've also done is subdivided these. So if you just want to teach your students or learn about bacterial transformation, you click on that, and that just shows you which two you need to do. So you don't have to go through the whole pathway or the whole cluster. If you want an introduction to genetic engineering, the highlighted ones are the ones we would recommend that you use or share with your students. So just as an example, to take you a level down again, an introduction to genetic engineering, this is a pathway. You can see at the top an explanation about what it is. You can click on more, and you can click start pathway. So this will just take you into this first piece of content, and you'll work your way through each piece of content. And as you can see, it's an assignment, then a piece of text, some more assignments, an image, and another assignment. And there are the learning objectives at the bottom. I know this might feel quite overwhelming. I'm going quite quickly because of our time, but I really encourage you. This is such a playground for you. You can just have a go at it. Really just go in and see what works for you. Click around. Yeah, that would be the best way to learn. But I'll also show you a bit of a cheat sheet we've got that will help you get up to speed later on. So we've gone from the idea of a single piece of content to a pathway to a cluster. I'm going to show you some types of content, single pieces of content. So I'm going back a bit now, that just we think are slightly different, and hopefully you'll find some value in. So I'm just going to close this tab, but I'm going to take us to the next tab here. So this is what we call an interactive or scrollable in-house. So what it is there's no sound, it's an animation, and this one's designed to let students become more au fait or more comfortable with the idea of what a micropipette is. So it's an introduction to micropipetting. So essentially, if you're sitting in class and you have a video playing, some students may not pick up everything or may not be concentrating. But if you put this into a pathway or assign this to a student, they have the option to then control the speed of what's happening using the rollerball on their mouse or the scroller on the far right or the arrows on the left of the screen. They can go forwards and backwards. And so while you might be a school that has access to wonderful equipment, there are many schools out there which don't. This offers the opportunity for them to learn about, in this case, a micropipette and do it at their own pace. It's also wonderful in situations where there are diagrams that might have lots of labels that students may not notice where they're pointing to exactly. So this is that offers that opportunity to actually say, hang on a minute, the tip ejector collar is this darker gray thing. Okay, now I understand, I can be comfortable and move forward. And so this is designed just to put the student back into control or put agency in their hands, put them back in control of their learning. And so these, as I say, are just nice animations. You can skip through them by going along these buttons, or you can jump up and down and move quickly through it by using the scroller on the far right. But essentially, this is just a nice animation allowing students to take control of the process and go backwards and forwards as many times as they need to, till they feel comfortable, they know what this particular topic is about.
So, Andrew,
Right.
if a teacher has assigned or shared this with her students, is it only available to them for a limited time, or how does that work? Would they be able to go back whenever they want to?
You can use all of this whenever you like, 3 in the morning, 5 in the afternoon, 10 at night. It's available nonstop. There's no limit, there's no cost, there's no account required. Everything I'm showing you today, you don't need an account to play with or to learn from. I'll show you in a minute what you need an account for, but before we get there, I'll just show you one more type of content piece, if that's all right.
Fantastic, so yes.
Great, I'm just going to close this one down, and we're going to move across into what we call simulations. So I know I said earlier, you've probably all seen the simulation before. These are simulations that LabXchange have built. And essentially, this is just a description about what's happening, and you just click start. And what's going to ask you for is what level you'd like. And essentially, a level just means how many tips or hints would you like to get. And I did biology a long time ago, so I always go for 1. And essentially, what you've got here is you've got a lab bench grayed out in the background. You've got your notebook highlighted on the far right. And the notebook essentially allows you to have a look at what the context of what you're going to do in the simulation is. Then if you click on next at the bottom, it shows you the materials you're going to be using. So before you even start using the materials, we're trying to build up those comfort levels and get students to see, okay, so there's a red dye solution. What does that mean? I can click on that and it just says it's red dye in a tube. Okay, fairly straightforward. But there's a P20 pipette. What is that? So that's the device used to draw up and dispense volumes of liquid between 2 and 20 microliters. Okay. And so you're able to click through on all these different pieces of content. And as I say, every simulation is different. We've got lots of different simulations with lots of different pieces of equipment. Another great aspect of these simulations is that they remove the barrier to students who don't have access to labs, or the financial barrier or the geographic barrier. But just like any good lab experiment, it asks you for a prediction with obviously a hypothesis. And so this one is just about putting dye on a piece of paper. So I'm just going to randomly guess, and let's see what happens. So this is just a high-level protocol before the simulation. Right, so here's my bench. So now on the right-hand side, I've still got this notebook. You can't hide it if you're very confident. Just by clicking on the blue hexagon, you can bring it back. And these highlighted steps essentially give you a step-by-step process to follow if you want to end up with the right solution. Or at least you'll have done the process correctly. Whether your outcomes are right, that still remains. So I won't take you through all of them, but essentially you can pick up any piece of equipment here, and there's a hint. So the volumes are typically measured in microliters. That's great to know. So now I'm also going to set the volume on this one because I need to be using the P20 micropipette. I need to set the volume in order to make sure that I have the right amount of red dye. So let me put a tip on that. So you can add the tip by placing it on top of the box. There we go. It's important to always close the tip box to avoid contamination. So with hints like that, we're always trying to give the most realistic experience to a student. You know, you wouldn't walk around a lab and leave everything open if people are running experiments, because obviously their experiments may not necessarily be, they may be contaminated, so they may not run correctly. Okay, and then we just play around with it. And of course, as soon as you want it to work and get you the second stop instead of the first, it never does that. Oh, there we go. And then remember to always put the used tips in the trash. So I'm not going to go through all of these steps, but I just want to show you how flexible it is. Really, it's a free environment. So I'm just going to go through all of these.
So before you move away from this, if you're using a real pipette, how similar is that? So the tips they're giving, is it really relevant? So if the children then went, or the students go into a lab, would they be able to use it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are designed to be as close as possible to the real thing. Obviously, it's an animated feel as opposed to a real feel, but there's still the design elements have been done by subject matter experts, both at Boston and Harvard themselves. So yes, this is absolutely as close to real as you can find within this this environment.
Thank you. That's really cool.
So just by quickly running to the end of this simulation, so here it shows you your results. So what my predicted results were, so slightly out, and what my actual results were. So this isn't going to tell you, you know, you did a wonderful job, you got it all right when you've actually stuffed it up. I mean, it's real world science. So that's what we want students to get their heads around. They want to learn from mistakes, because in so many cases, we do science, we have such limited time as educators to stand in front of a class, and maybe with limited equipment, not every child can be involved in the experiment. You've got to get it done within a short class period. And so we do it in a manner that teaches them to follow the few steps that they've got to do in the short time, and it's a bit cookie cutter. This offers them the opportunity to make mistakes and to see the results of those mistakes and to learn from them, which is how science is really done. So this is just showing you my predicted results, the actual and then the ideal, with a little feedback area for students to sort of reflect a bit. And then there are some questions to help them reflect on the entire process. So what did they actually learn? And then we summarize this in terms of the key takeaway messages that the students should be thinking about. So that is just one example of a simulation that we've got on LabXchange. And so that is, as I said, something that we think makes us slightly different in some respects. There's also, just going back to the library now, that's where we're at, we're back to the library. You'll see the refine button here again. You see there's a background knowledge. I just want to highlight here that we are a global platform, and so we don't align to any one particular curriculum. That's why you will find caps-aligned curriculum content that's from one of our partners, Excel Education. They're a great South African team doing good work. And so we've got background knowledge. We've kept it as agnostic as possible. And so none would mean someone entering high school, whereas some would mean someone probably on the end of high school to leaving high school into university age group, whereas extensive would be you are doing undergraduate level content at a university. So that's just a quick overview of that, because it's quite important when you're looking for content to understand the vocab again around how we divvied it up. I have mentioned content partners. Here again is, with this refined button, just a few examples of them. It's not an exhaustive list. I think as of yesterday, we had 78 content partners on the site. So we're also bringing on more partners every day. As I said at the beginning, it's part of my job. And so that constantly changes. And so the number of pieces of content and the number of subjects we relate to will obviously change over time. Every day you come back, there'll be different ones.
So Andrew, with talking to that, my favorite that I've always known about was FET. So those simulations, and for example, teaching electric circuits with the children, that they could go into an electric simulation and build a circuit and see that it works, and then go and build with actual components. I really love that. So knowing that there are all these different simulations and activities is just incredible.
Yeah, well, there's your FET simulations, about 130 of them on the library. So there you go. So yeah, you just have to play around, and I would really encourage you just to play around. Things like popular tags are just words that we've put in place for certain like content types. So it's just a quick and easy way that you might be searching for things. And then language, which isn't really relevant, I think, for a South African audience, but maybe we have people joining us from overseas. We have been able to translate our content across 12 different languages. You'll see them there. But I think what I'd like to show you now is, I have mentioned the library, but I've also mentioned about having an account. And I showed you how to clone and copy and paste into your private area. I'd like to just step you back around that and just to explain what that means. So because I have an account, I've set one up. That means I have access to my dashboard. So if I click on my dashboard, that's going to take me to a place where it's just essentially my private space. And what it's showing me is that I've got content, I've got favorites, so things that I want to have access to on a regular basis or quite quickly. I also have classes and mentees. As a student account, you would have the exact same layout, except instead of mentees, it would say mentors. So let's start with content. So again, you've got the same refine button here. This is content I've created. So as it says, my content. So I've copied and pasted and changed the coronavirus pathway a few times. You can see it there. And you can add your own new content, as I showed you earlier when we were on that pathway and you wanted to add a single piece of content or multiple pieces to that pathway. You can also use the same function to add content to your own area. Again, it might be some great worksheets you've got that you want to keep and keep them available electronically here. So your favorites, as I said, is just content pieces on the public library that you've liked, so you have access to them quickly. Classes is the thing that I really wanted to explain to you. So classes is a way for you to disseminate information amongst your students or amongst your peers if you want them to see certain pieces. So what this allows me to do is to create a class. And what that means is I can then put a class name, I can put the subject it relates to, and select the maximum number of students, anywhere from 5 to 300, write a description, chuck in my name as the author, put up a picture, and accept the terms and create the class. What that does then is it creates a thumbnail like you see here. And on the thumbnail, you see there's a class code. Now, if I want anyone to join my class, the class code is the number that they need in order to apply to my class. And I say the word apply because what that means is I send it out via WhatsApp or an email. My students then go onto their accounts. So they create accounts on LabXchange, and they go onto their learner dashboard, and under their classes, they don't create a class, they apply to join. When they apply to join, it pops up a window saying, please input this code. And they just put in the code that you shared with them, sorry, late in the day. And essentially what that means is when you go into a class such as this one, you'll be on your home screen looking at content, but you'll also have learners, progress, and discussion. So if someone's applied to my class, I can click on learners. Okay, there's no one here, so maybe this is a bad class to show you. Let me show you a different class. On this class, if I click on learners, it's going to show you an overview of all the learners that I have on this class. Again, there's only one, Julian Taylor. If you're a Cape Townian teacher who teaches science, you may know the name. He's a colleague as well. And essentially, you can message the student individually, you can assign them content, you can check them their progress. But above the line, if someone had applied to my class, you'd see them waiting in sort of above the line, and you need to approve that. And the reason we have that approval security layer is because we don't want people being able to access your class and potentially your learners and engage with them over the discussion forum or any other ways, because a lot of the time we're going to be dealing with learners who are under the age of 18, and so are minors. I did mention you could also look at progress and discussion. So the progress side is showing you in your class, all your students would be individual rows. You'd see lots of rows of students with their names. And then any content you assign through your class, you can see if you've put an assignment in there, you can see the average class score of those assignments, or the overall score of your student. You can also look at the class progress, which is just if you've given 10 items and they've worked through 9, that's 90%. Or if you've given multiple pieces of content with different layers or different, like if you've given 2 pathways, then each pathway will have its own percentage complete to give an overall percentage complete. And now you may also be wondering, is this, can I use this in my LMS? And the question is, yes, you can. You just download whatever you need from here, and that'll put it into a CSV file, which you can then upload. Again, similar principle. We're trying to be agnostic of any particular systems to the exclusion of others. And so that's why we do it this way. So the discussion is the last tab in the class that you can see. And essentially, this just allows you to either stimulate class discussion or check in on your students having a discussion or ask them to discuss around certain topics, and they can interact on here. So it's just really a nice place for them to interact around your class. So
that's really fantastic.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, in terms of how you can engage with your students and they can ask and collaborate on the topic even outside an LMS. So even if a school doesn't have an LMS, you can be setting up these pathways where the students can actually be engaging really effectively.
Exactly. So you can save time as a teacher by utilizing a pathway that's already created, or create your own. And then you can obviously share that through the class with your students, monitor their progress on that, but also be able to engage with them on the platform, stimulating discussions. I did mention mentoring. So essentially what this means, I'm just going to jump to the student side, what we call a learner dashboard. And I'm just showing it to you because I have that account and I want to show you what it looks like to be a mentor or be a mentee. Essentially, again, Julian Taylor, he's my mentor in this case, and he's able to, as you can see, assign me particular pieces of content. So if you've got a student, or if you yourself are a lifelong student who wants to find someone who is has a similar interest in a particular field of science as you, you're able to do that. And the way to do that is to go back to the library. And you see here, there's a people button. If I click on the people button, I'm seeing everyone who has, who's got, well, not everyone, but most people who have an account. And I can see the different account types. And I can see there are 224 people who have opened themselves up to be mentoring. And I say open themselves up because it's actually just a toggle you do on your own personal, once you've logged in on your own setup, and it's up here on the top right under your symbol name. And so all of these people I can see are putting themselves out for mentoring. So if I'm a student that wants to engage with someone at Harvard University, or there are these 6 people, or if I want to engage with someone at Amgen, a biotechnology institute, there are these people here who've made themselves available. So I have the opportunity through this platform to engage with someone who might be doing something that I want to know about and learn more about, and so they can help you by taking you under their wing. Excuse me.
That's incredible. That's opening up the whole world to the children or the students around them if they use this effectively. I mean, that's really such an opportunity.
It is, but it's also a two-way street. You can, if someone isn't, as you saw, Julian had assigned me particular pieces of content. And if I see someone that I'm putting time into not doing the same, you can end the relationship in terms of like stop being somebody's mentor and terminate that function from your side.
But
you
that's
can also
fair.
look at, it has to be fair. That has to, yes, because you're using somebody's time, which is, as we all know, very precious.
Yes.
And we're preciously running out of it. So I won't keep you too much longer. So what I've shown you then is we started off with just the homepage, then the library. Then I took you through the different pieces, types of content. I took you through the different groupings of content from a single asset to a pathway to a cluster, and then showed you the interactive animation, the simulation. And then I've taken you to your dashboard, which is when you have an account. And that shows you when you can create a class, favorite content, access your own content, add new content into your private library. And no one will have access to that content as long as you don't share the link with them. So if I share the link with a private piece of content from my library, someone will have access to it. Obviously, they won't view it through your library. They'll view it like any piece of content of the library. So what I'm going to do is just close this and go back to, well, I'll go backwards and forwards. So here we have just saying, you've been through a crash course. I've given you a lot to think about, and I probably went too quickly because I talked too quickly. But if you'd like to know how to start off on LabXchange, the really best place to start is our remote learning cluster. And this cluster, I think if Karen has the link, she'll just pop it into the chat box. So thanks very much. And what it does is it'll open up this page for you. And this cluster is basically built to allow you to learn how to get started on LabXchange, or whether it's adding your own content, creating a class, or creating an account. It's really all the answers should be here, or at least the majority of them should be. And if they're not there, you can always contact me. I think my email address should be scrolling around somewhere on the bottom of your screen.
It is.
Thanks, Karen. Alternatively, I can just show you quickly here. It's very simple to create an account. You go to the home page, www.labexchange.org. Top right-hand corner, there's the big yellow button that says sign up. You verify your age. It then takes you to edX, because we are actually partnered with edX. We use their backend, and you go through the edX sign-up process. If you have an edX account, you automatically have a LabXchange account. And once you sign up for a LabXchange account, you automatically have an edX account. And then you just verify via email, and that's it. So I've done a lot of talking. I'll just move to the next slide. But if there are any questions, I'd love to take them now and just be able to give you guys a chance to ask some questions. But if I could really encourage you, have a look around, go and play on the website, create an account, create a class, share some content with, build your own content, and just talk about LabXchange in your community, talk about it with your colleagues and your students, and see what feedback they give you. And we would love your feedback. So please feel free to give us some feedback. And if you need to connect with us, these are the ways you can do it. We're on social media. There's obviously the platform. You can join our mailing list if you'd like. And you can also contact us either directly to myself or the Collaborate at LabXchange. If you need any a similar webinar for your school, you're more than welcome to reach out to us. And we do this all the time. We're just trying to create awareness around this absolutely free resource. So thank you all very much for your time this evening. I know it's late and you're probably all dying to relax after a long day of work. So Karen, thank you very much for having me. We really appreciate you being so kind to offer us this opportunity. And thank you to everybody watching for taking your time to learn about LabXchange.
Oh, no, but thanks, Andrew. That's been really informative. You spoke about it being for 13-year-olds only. What I'm wanting to know, if you're a primary school teacher, and if you're using something like a Google Classroom or a space where the school is already seen as a role of parenthesis, would your students be able to get into age-appropriate content there if you selected things? Or because when I hopped in, it said, are you older than 13? So is there a way that primary school teachers could use this?
Yeah, absolutely. So the content may not be the most relevant for them, but there will be bits and pieces of content that they can obviously find useful, and they're more than welcome to make an account for themselves and go searching the library for the content that's useful for them. So there's no barrier to teachers who aren't teachers for age groups 13 years and upwards. It's just we don't have a lot of content for that age group because our focus has been on 13 years and upwards. Yeah. And the reason our focus is that way is because in the United States, where we're based, you need to be 13 years or older to have sort of an online account. And so we're sort of hamstrung by that legality. So we just go along with it, yeah.
Marius has got a question. He says, can you create a local replica to avoid internet costs?
Marius, that's a great question. So if anybody knows anyone at any of the big telcos who we've been trying to engage with for the last year, please, I'll happily give you my telephone number. I'd love to hear about them. So no, unfortunately, we are, as I say, based out the US. So the content is available online, unfortunately not offline. And that is a challenge in South Africa that we completely recognize. It's a challenge more than in South Africa and Africa as well, which is somewhere we're also trying to share this information. But essentially, unless we can get zero rated, which is quite a task as well, especially with someone with overseas-based service, it's always going to be a challenge. But I think the best way we can start is by starting with the resources we have and the capabilities we have. And so making, even if that's not as wide or broad as we would like to make it to the world, we make it as broad as we can with what we have right now.
As we close, I just want to say, James told us that while he was watching, he made an account. So he was so excited. So you've got one extra account after the chat today. But
thank you, James. I appreciate it.
So it's fantastic what you've been sharing. Hopefully we can get a whole lot more schools and universities and TVET colleges using this amazing resource, which is available to them. So thanks, Andrew, for your time. Take care.
Thanks very much, Karen. And thank you very much to everybody. Have a good evening. Cheers.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.